Namaskar and good afternoon. My friend Mr. Ketan Sayya, Ritesh, my co-speaker Padma Shri, and the person who generously introduced me, is always kind to me, Mr. Ankush Gupta. Padma Shri is such an expert in her field that when government was thinking of giving Padma Shri to her, they said her name is already Padma Shri, so now I have recommended that they should give her Padma Bhushan or something. Well, that was a wonderful analysis of NAFRA cases. I will be dealing with the disciplinary cases, case studies on our normal code of ethics. I am aware that normally the ethics is a topic which is conducive to a siesta or a nap but now we have yet to have our lunch. Sometimes they say that when people are hungry, that time also they feel sleepy. There was a teacher who came in the classroom and he gave a lecture, full-fledged lecture on the importance of mother. Students were dozing as usual. At the end of the lecture, he just made one backbencher stand up and he said, "Hey, you stand up and tell me who is superior, mother or mentor? माँ श्रेष्ठ है या गुरु श्रेष्ठ है?" तो बच्चा नींद से जाग उठा, बोला, "गुरुजी ये क्या क्वेश्चन हुआ? Mentor is superior, Guru श्रेष्ठ है." I explained to you the importance of mother for such a long time and you are saying mentor is superior. Why do you say so? Student said, "Sir, the answer is very simple. A mother can put to sleep only one child at a time. So, usually these topics are such that people unfortunately do not pay much attention. Once we write exam, the final C exam, thereafter we forget, but now you cannot afford to do so because last 10 to 15 years, this whole nuisance value of the disciplinary cases or the misconduct proceedings has made us all awake. And as our motto is, Ya Esha Supteshu Jagarti, he who is awake when the world around is asleep. So friends, today the focus is, I am not going to discuss the full principles of Code of Ethics as such because that's a very long topic. What I am going to deal with, just as Padma Shri Madam had also done, that whatever cases, because she has actually hands-on experience of all these matters, same way, the actual cases of disciplinary mechanism which I had an occasion to handle, and those were as many as about 400, I have selected a few. All the facts of the cases are not narrated in the PPT as such because the PPT covers mainly the principles. But all these principles will be discussed with the help of case laws. Now friends, the first and foremost case which I always start with, there are three cases which I always start with. First and foremost is that in your profession, you should never, or rather you should eliminate the concept of good faith from your mind. You should not do anything in good faith. And for this, when you are signing a balance sheet, you are signing an audit or you are doing anything, don't trust anyone, not your article clerk, not your colleague, not your staff, not your partner, not even your spouse. The husband and wife both were CAs. Wife signed a particular cooperative society's audit for 3 years and there is a rotation in the cooperative field. So after 3 years, the husband signed those audits, the subsequent 3 years audits, and in the 8th year, there was a divorce petition between the two and the wife filed a complaint that the husband took her audit without her NOC. So to that extent, the people go. And therefore, remember, no relations are permanent. In today's Kali Yuga, no relations are permanent. And that is why many people say, ये जो ग्रुप है ना फैमिली, आई हैव बीन हैंडलिंग देयर मैटर्स फॉर लास्ट 30 years and I am like a family member to them. This is very boastfully many chartered accountants say. I tell them, just increase your fees by 5% and see whether you still continue to be a family member. Because the clients are ruthlessly commercial. And whenever it comes to the disciplinary cases, there is no one to support you except your own paperwork and except your own diligence with which can be shown. As they say that work should not only be done, but it should be seen that it is done. And the faintest of ink is stronger than the strongest of memories. As Padmashi also mentioned, that सब इधर रहता है लेकिन इस पे पेपर पे कुछ नहीं आता है. So remember that the faintest of ink is stronger than the strongest of memories. The next case is that a chartered accountant was sitting in his office. He was handling the tax audit of a proprietary concern, and that proprietor's married daughter comes to his office, and she says that she wants her to attest the ITR of her husband and mother-in-law. He asked the usual questions, why it is required and all, and she said it is required for some loan purpose or whatever. And then he verified, because he had not filed those returns, but she had brought the hard copies, so he verified, and he saw that everything was correct from the computer he saw, and he certified it in a proper manner, in a proper language which is prescribed or rather recommended by the institute. So there was no default on that. Within a month's time, he received a complaint from that lady's husband saying that, how did you part with my attested ITR with my wife because without my written authority? Because the wife had filed a case of domestic violence against him, and the attested certificate was required for that. So friends, at every stage you have to be skeptical. The professional skepticism in this lies as to this lady had never come to his office before, and how is it that without any reference from her father or from her husband, she is all of a sudden coming and asking these certificates? So you would always have to be inquisitive about all these things. The next case, as I told you, there are 3 cases which are prime and which actually are like eye-openers. In fact, all these cases which I will be discussing, which are happening in our day-to-day lives, and they set some principles, but small negligence, because earlier we have all the case laws. When we come to case laws, all our decisions, when we did our CA, the decisions were that auditor is only a watchdog and not a bloodhound. Now that principle is diluted, rather it is gone, and now they expect you to be bloodhounds only and not merely watchdogs. All the orders of the disciplinary cases, they write that, means the disciplinary committee writes that there is a distinction between audit and investigation. We all recognize that, but ultimately everybody expects that you should do investigation only. And the reason is very simple. Previously, in good old days, when we became CAs, most of the energies and time was spent on the actual arithmetical accuracy of the accounts. जब trial balance tally हो जाता था, तो there used to be a celebration. And trial balance tally होने के बाद भी balance sheet tally होता था, और there will be a bigger celebration. So those days are gone. Now you are not required to spend your time on these mundane things. So now you are expected to devote your time on something very creative. And that creativity comes out of your skepticism. A true auditor. That means they say that audit and investigation, but now many cases are coming up from the regulators and especially from SFIO and CBI. I will be dealing some of those cases, but only yesterday one case was referred, and you can't imagine कि कहाँ से कहाँ तक case जाता है. I will give you 1 or 2 instances of that. Only yesterday the case referred was that there was a company which was incorporated about 9 years ago, and in the company formation papers the promoters had given them many documents, in which one document was about the NOC for the registered address. Now it's a very simple routine letter, we take it from the owner of the premises. But now it is revealed that that particular NOC was a fabricated one, it was fake. Now poor chartered accountant, what would he do? Because the promoters give all these papers, you are not expected to verify, go to the owner and verify whether he had really issued that. But now the regulators have started expecting these things also. That means you cannot trust anything at the face value. You have to get something more evidence that the certificate is really genuine. Of course, there are issues like under the Companies Act, once the certificate of incorporation is given, then normally they cannot question the veracity or other things of the documents. And then there are like you can say all the people when they listen to this lecture, because my sole purpose of this is that ever since I started handling these disciplinary cases, I have lost my sleep. So my sadistic pleasure lies in ensuring that you also lose your sleep for at least 3 to 4 days. So this is because of that I am sharing all these experiences. People take things for granted, and nowadays, because of this Kali Yuga, all the regulators are also becoming active, and all the people, the clients at large, have become aware of the nuisance value. So these things are being used for blackmailing the chartered accountant, they are being used for extracting the money. And this is a very sad part of this disciplinary mechanism. So the third case, there was a very senior firm, more than 80-year-old firm, all systems in place. There was a private limited company whose audit they were doing for last more than 25 years. And that private limited company consisted only of 2 directors who were brothers of each other, only 2 shareholders. 60% senior person was the chairman. And on, say, when the last date was, say, 30th of September for filing the return, on 26th, the younger director comes to the office of the CA and he says, "Sir, as usual, we have done the audit properly. What we will do is, my brother is very busy. So, you put your signature on the financial statements. I will obtain my brother's signature and we will file the return." In good faith, this chartered accountant gave that particular thing, financial statement is signed, and that's many of us do quite often, that in good faith we put our signatures first and then hand it over for the client's signature. So he took them away, and he always had a skimming mind, because what he did, he obtained his brother's signature but never put his own signature. And he submitted the returns, uploaded, and within a month's time he filed a complaint on 2 counts against this chartered accountant. And those are all eye-opening, and actually you will lose your sleep, because the points which he had made was that under the Companies Act, it was necessary to have 2 directors' signatures, but here only 1 director had signed, which had deliberately he had avoided signing. That is the thing which you should always note. And the next point means, now here also, let me clarify that many people are under an impression, especially those small lot of auditors who are not very well versed and exposed to the large audits. They are under an impression that once the 2 directors sign, their job is over, they can jolly well sign the balance sheet as an auditor, which is not so. What is most important under the Companies Act is the approval of accounts in the board meeting. And thereafter the board authorizes 2 of them to sign on behalf of the board. And that the sequence is that thereafter the signature is there of the board of directors. That means approval in the board meeting is of prime importance. Whereas here, in many cases, what happens is, practically a small chartered accountant, a middle-level chartered accountant, that does practically everything for the client. He only finalizes the account, he only makes the presentation, schedule 3, everything he does. Notes, queries also he raises, replies also he only gives, MRL also he prepares, everything is done by the chartered accountant. That is the plight of our profession. Sometimes I wonder whether this is a profession at all, because when there is no independence, how can there be a profession? But these questions are dealt in the panel discussion. So here in this case, we do everything for the client, but do not obtain a simple certificate or a confirmatory letter that these accounts were approved in the board meeting held on such and such date. Now this is of utmost importance. This small letter will actually have some supporting with you that these were approved by the board, because now there were cases where in good faith the auditor signed, that 2 or 3 directors also had signed, he had made a presentation in the board, and there was one particular director who lost the election in the subsequent AGM, and therefore he was aggrieved, and the AGM had been held also. When the balance sheet, just for the sake of good order, was sent to him for his signature, because he was out of Mumbai, he mischievously put his signature and put a date which was subsequent to the AGM date, and then he struck it off, indicating that these balance sheets were not signed before the AGM date. Now there are enough evidences to show that all these things were presented in the board meeting in which he was present, and he had written a letter to the auditor that you have done a wonderful job. And still when it comes to the filing of because he had some vengeance, because he had not been elected, so now to harass all those people, the directors, the board and everyone, he had filed a complaint that actually balance sheet was not signed before the AGM date. So the point which I am trying to make is that you must get one letter at least from the promoters or from the directors or from the company secretary that these accounts were approved in the board meeting of such and such date. Similarly, most of the disciplinary cases arise out of the disputes among some other parties, like two shareholders, directors or partners or trustees, they are having disputes. Usually what happens is, from a group, from out of 4 or 5 directors, only one person interacts with a chartered accountant. The others are either not interested or they have faith in that person and they are not perhaps well versed with the paperwork. In reality, what happens is, we have a rapport only with one person. But when there are disputes between them, that is all directors against a particular director who are dealing with us, then all these other persons simply disown everything. All the financial statement they disown. They say the meetings were never held. We were never issued any notices. We have never seen these balance sheets. They say they go to the extent of saying that we are not aware of any financial statements. And because the one or two directors, the signatures are obtained, sometimes we don't even verify whether really some director had signed or not. And cases are there like that also. That it is because we in good faith we give to them, and whether they really sign, they sign it themselves or they fabricate, kya signature lete, that also we don't verify. But nowadays it has become rather in our own interest to verify whether these signatures are genuine, reasonably genuine. There was a case against a company secretary where there was a company promoted by only husband and wife, and their one son, third director joined them. And he said, I'll get you lot of export orders. So they allotted a particular budget for him. He kept on spending money lavishly, and there was not a single export order. So that those two promoters wanted to get rid of that person. But he was not going to resign. One fine morning, the husband, the directors, the husband calls the company secretary and he says, Arey, ultimately he has sent a resignation letter. So you come and now you do the formalities of uploading the discontinuous cessation of the director. He did it. And then later on, that person has filed a complaint that I have never resigned. This is a bogus signature. This is a fake signature and this is forged one. And the company secretary then accepted that yes, apparently it is not his signature. Now that means to that extent you have to be careful. So that this two directors case, I will complete that story. So the first complaint was that only one director had signed. The second was even more disturbing. He said one of the cars of the companies was registered only in the name of the other director, and the auditor had not made any comment on that. It was not registered in the name of the company. Now, most of the chartered accountants, they have an obsession only on the tax laws, tax proceedings. So they come with the argument that under the Income Tax Act, even if it is registered in partner's or director's name, you get the depreciation. But that depreciation under the Income Tax Act you get because of the beneficial user of the asset or beneficial ownership. But here, when you are certifying the assets and liabilities of an entity, it is imperative that you also verify whether that asset stands in the name of that. Otherwise, they have to give a comment on that. Obviously, there was some friction between the two brothers, because that is reflected here. So remember that when we ourselves may not be aware that we have to verify whether that particular, especially in case of vehicles. See, immovable property and all, we fairly verify whether it is really standing in the name of the company or not. But in case of these movables, and especially for vehicles, because there is a tendency in the commercial world that they buy the vehicle only in the name of an individual director or partner and not in the name of the company. And therefore, if we are ourselves not very serious about or not aware, it is very difficult that we can train our articles also to verify these things. And now you will ask me that despite such a long relationship, why did he file a complaint against the firm? And the answer is even more disturbing. That director had approached the firm with a request to accommodate his daughter as a dummy article, which the firm had refused. So to take a vengeance of that, he filed such complaints. So this, to that extent, the nuisance value of people have gone. Now, these are the three basic cases where I have to establish that there is no such thing as good faith, that you should always eliminate that concept from your mind. There is no such thing as good faith. If you do anything in good faith, people are bound to take advantage of that and they are likely to blackmail you. Next is, in any disciplinary case, the first and foremost thing they ask is your working papers. And working papers, now we have heard enough about the importance of working papers. But those working papers are also, there should be proper training as to how to generate working papers. In fact, our institute has devised a course on the working paper management. And I think our staff and because ultimately who are going to generate the working papers? It is the staff and it is the articles who are going to generate the working papers. So that also is an area where one should ideally be very particularly paying attention. Now, there are certain principles of the disciplinary cases. Over the years, certain things have been evolved, and those are very important because many people are under an impression that the working papers are required only for the purposes of audit and attest functions, or rather they feel that all these disciplinary and ethical things, they apply only for audit, which is not so. The madam also mentioned that certification or even advisory services also require lot of documentation. For example, if there is a query, then you should always insist that the query should be in writing. Now, in large firms, these systems are there, but in a small firm, the client asks queries only on phone. They make us work, and later on they say that हमने वो already idea drop किया था. But your query, your counter questions, the things which you relied upon, the case law which you relied upon, the expert's opinion that you relied upon, all that should form as a working paper. But sometimes this certification that reminds me of one more very interesting case. Sometimes we feel that beyond this, in a particular case, what more could be seen? There's a very well-known gym company, and they wanted to expand the business. So they had ordered the equipment at 9 venues. The gym equipment was ordered. 3 crores per venue. The auditor was a very senior person, very conscientious person. I know him personally. The company, the gym company, was a very reputed company, and the bank disbursed the payment, the cost of that equipment of 27 crores to the vendor of the equipment. And then one of the terms of the sanction letter was that they should obtain the utilization certificate. Now the poor auditor was a good person and said, "Are company reputed hai, bank has already made disbursement." He simply asked the company कि equipment है कहाँ वो physically. They told, नहीं वो जो अपना थोड़ा इंटीरियर का काम बाकी है ना, इसलिए that equipment is not yet delivered. And there was a catch in that, because the entire 27 crores were swindled away, and poor chartered accountant is facing the music that he has not verified the things. Now I am also wondering, and I am throwing it open to your consideration, as to in a normal case what more could be verified in this particular case. Then you have to go to the vendor or write to the vendor how to go about it, because ultimately all these certificates are required in a very short time, urgency. Usually you should always avoid urgent work. In any certification or any work which is done urgently, there must be something fishy that you should be able to suspect. Now for example, large listed companies with say 10,000 crore turnover, registered office somewhere in Ahmedabad. These cases were happened very rampantly in a recent 3 or 4 years. Closing stock shown is 600 crores and they want some certificate of the stock valuation or certificate urgently. So they catch hold of some roadside chartered accountant somewhere in Borivali in Mumbai, and that chartered accountant, he feels, and they offer him 1 lakh rupees for just 3-4 days, because they want it in 3 to 4 days. Now a small time chartered accountant, when he is a new entrant in the practice, he feels, "Arey, ye bada company, listed company, all their balance sheets are on a very glossy paper, and all these at the hem of their affair there are all experts, big names, statutory auditors, internal auditors, CFOs, company secretaries, तो सब ठीक रहेगा." That is the presumption on which he proceeds. And the problem is that he doesn't have a single piece of paper, working paper, as to where are the locations, where is the inventory, how many staff members he had, whom he deployed, what were the queries, what were the observations, nothing. He feels that everything must be proper. And he gets 1 lakh rupees within 3 days' time. He is very happy, but then he receives a complaint because the actual stock is hardly 35 crore rupees. So these are the things which are very commonly happening. There are many cases nowadays coming from the not so developed or not so urban type areas, mofussil areas, where they had certified signed the listed company's audit. And their impression is that although it is a listed company, now the turnover is very mamuli, like 3 to 5 crores. कौन देखने जा रहा है? And on that they sign the balance sheets, and I have come across unfortunately 2 or 3 chartered accountants, उन्होंने Ind AS ये नाम भी कभी सुना नहीं था. Means they didn't know, even they were not aware कि क्या देखना चाहिए, क्या नहीं देखना चाहिए. And now they are repenting. They say, "Sir, now we are realizing that we should not have accepted this type because we don't have that kind of exposure." These things are happening very commonly now, because small chartered accountants are now victimized because they don't have that kind of exposure, and all these complaints are now coming. There was one case which was very interesting. There is one poser, and I think if you are already aware of the answer, please don't reply, but there was a company in which there was a huge tax addition, means income addition of say 25 to 30 crores. And they wanted to file an appeal, so they approached a CA firm. The chartered accountant said that, "Okay, I will file the appeal, I will deal with the appeal, I will attend the appeal. My fees will be such and such percentage of the total addition made." There were 8 to 10 grounds of appeal. He fought all the grounds tooth and nail, And he got them lot of relief, like some grounds were fully allowed, some were partly allowed, some were rejected, all that. But end result was very good. And he sent an invoice, as discussed, my invoice is such and such % of the total addition made. The company wrote back that it is unethical to charge on a percentage basis, and therefore you have committed an unethical thing, and we don't like to deal with unethical people, so we won't pay your bill. This was the reply from the company. Now, if you are, those who are aware, please don't say anything, but otherwise, what would be your reaction on this? If you have understood the facts properly, what is your reaction to this? He had raised a bill on a percentage of the total addition. I hope you are all awake. So what is your view on this? Okay. Any other view? Remember now, because we have not read the clauses of our this misconduct carefully or minutely, and that case was very brilliantly fought by the counsel of that chartered accountant. He said what is prohibited is the percentage of the result of your work or the outcome of your work. I have not charged on the deductions or the allowances which I have achieved for you. I am charging on the entire addition of 25 crores. Because my effort and my input is with reference to the entire addition. Suppose there are 8 to 10 grounds of appeal. I have worked on each and every ground. The result, degree of result may be different. It may be varying. But ultimately my work and my input is on the entire addition, and I have not charged on the basis of the outcome of my work. And therefore he was absolved. There is no misconduct in that. So these are the things which are. Then there are many interesting cases. In one case, the Kolkata High Court has held that even an error is not a misconduct. Every error is not a misconduct. Even a blunder is not a misconduct. Even negligence is not a misconduct. Then misconduct is, there should be gross negligence. And gross negligence means there has to be an element of ill motive or dishonesty. Now, if you argue these things, because people what they do is they make undue advantage of such principles which are set by the High Court. So the disciplinary committee counter argues that suppose a friend of yours comes who is a very honest person, he doesn't do any hanky-panky, but he is not an accounts person, and he presents a balance sheet before you and he says, "Arey, मेरे accountant ने बनाया है, just put your signature and I will submit it to the bank." And you don't verify, you trust him and you put your signature. Now, people argue that I don't have any ill motive, I don't have any dishonesty. The very fact that you have put your signature without verification itself is a dishonesty. Because that misleads the world at large. Because the clause says that without putting your signature without verification is a misconduct. And your signature should be a hallmark of credibility. So without verification you are doing something that itself is dishonesty, which people don't realize. And these things happen very frequently in terms of for bank loans and other things, because we put our signatures in the balance sheets for our small clients, and if something fishy is transpiring out of it, then there are very serious problems to the auditor. Now another interesting case. Just as, because there are certain principles which I mentioned, the principles, some of the principles are like this, that in a disciplinary case, it is not relevant whether the client or the complainant has any locus standi in that. That means he can be a total stranger. He is not a shareholder, not a director, not a vendor, not a lender, nothing. He has no interest whatsoever. He is not even remotely connected with that company. Still he can file a complaint. Because they say that disciplinary proceedings are quasi-criminal proceedings. And therefore anybody can file a complaint. So this is one danger point that one must keep in mind. Second is, it is not necessary that the complainant comes with clean hands. Now there are many cases which I have come across where the complainant is a confirmed convict criminal. He is behind bars. Even in the press, all media, he is known to be a very notorious person. He is a criminal person. Still, if he files a complaint, you cannot counter argue or you cannot say that ye badmash aadmi hai. They say that we are not concerned. There are other forums to take care of that. You tell us whether you have done the work properly. And today, friends, unfortunately, hundreds of chartered accountants are on bail and dozens of them are in jail. Because it has become so rampant now that immediately all these particularly investigating authorities, they make the chartered accountant or the auditors co-accused along with the promoters and directors. And the poor chartered accountant, just as she mentioned the penalty of 50 lakhs, the poor chartered accountant cannot even afford to have a good lawyer or a good counsel to argue all these matters in the criminal courts and which go on for decades. But these are the principles that the complainant's character is immaterial. Another principle is that time barring, because many people after listening to my lecture, they think of all the sins which they have committed in their own practice and they ask me a very favorite question. Sir, इसमें time bar कितना है? So remember that there is no such blanket or rigid time bar under these proceedings. There is a loose kind of time bar. They say that if a complaint is filed more than 7 years after the occurrence of the event complained against, and if the director or the president is satisfied that it is difficult or impossible to produce the evidence, then he may refuse to entertain the complaint. So there is a rider to that. That means if it is self-evident that you don't require any external evidence to prove this, then he can entertain even after 17 years. So this is and I'll give you a very interesting and classic example of this. There was a lady who had prepared a will. She died after about 12 years of preparing the will. When the will was opened, it was seen that a chartered accountant had signed it as a witness, but that lady had not signed it at all. Very common case, friends. In good faith we do. That poor chartered accountants must have been sitting in his office. Some people might have come and they would say, sir, वो इनकी जो आंट है ना, वो हॉस्पिटल में है, कल उनका सर्जरी होने वाला है, तो डॉक्टर्स हैव एडवाइस कि थोड़ा बिल बना के रखे, लॉयर्स हैव ऑल्सो एडवाइस, इट इज़ बेटर, एंड आप साइन कीजिए, हम उधर जाके उसकी सिग्नेचर ले लेंगे. And the chartered accountant don't keep track of all that. That is why I said that when there are financial statements, when you sign, have a practice of obtaining signatures on your copy, hard copy, from all directors or all partners or all trustees or all managing committee members, so that at least no one can claim, or rather one can disclaim it, saying that we were never shown these balance sheets. Another area where chartered accountants or as auditors are very poor and very much lacking is that they never verify the secretarial records. It is of utmost importance, and because they are not verified, many things or many complaints are arising out of that, because even their own appointment they don't verify properly. Whether minutes, whether the notices were issued, where the attendance was marked, nothing they verify, and they just proceed on the basis of some letter from a director that now you are hereby appointed as an auditor. So previous auditor communication वगैरह, all those सब गया भाड़ में ऐसा ही, they don't care for that, and many complaints are now coming from, because they don't even verify the secretarial records. Now there was one case where there was a listed company and there was a loan, unsecured loan. Earlier nationalized banks were giving unsecured loans up to 50 crores. And there was an unsecured loan like this taken by that company. And in the balance sheet, nowhere that loan appeared at all. And then there was an investigation. So for in some other context, then everything is surfaced. So there they verified, and there was a CBI matter. And in the CBI report, when the complaint was going on and I was studying the papers, the CBI report said that that was not a 40 crore loan which was given in that year for the first time. It was an enhancement of earlier 2 years loan. That means all 3 years auditors had missed out this particular loan. How it must have happened? That means they must have opened a secret account, and bank or certificate, your resolutions वगैरह that you generate on the computer and give. That is the usual practice. Nobody sees whether it is recorded in the minute book or not. And then it was never noticed. And from the separate unaccounted bank account, everything was, all these transactions happened, and there was a huge fraud. It was revealed, it was a huge fraud. And when the total loan, there was a stage where the banks felt that no, now we should go no longer unsecured loans, we should create a charge on that. That time it was revealed. Sometimes you can never imagine how a particular error or lapse gets revealed. There was a club. They had a hall. There were 300 to 400 members of the club. For members, the hall rent was, for example, 10,000 rupees, and for others, the hall rent was, say, 20,000 rupees. Now, there was a trusted manager who was just like one of the trustees, like, for example, 27 years he was working in that club. Now, he used to take 20,000 rupees, suppose there is an outsider, and he used to give receipt of 20,000, but he used to mention the name. He said, you just put your signature on the application, we will manage everything. And the application, he used to put some member's name. Now, each application had to be endorsed by the secretary for final, means like booking. Now, secretary was a very busy person, professional. He was not a full-time employee of that. He said, "Arey, ye to itna trusted manager hai, and he has mentioned everything, name वगैरह, and he is not ever expected to know the names of all the members as such. So he used to endorse blindly. And then sometimes these calamities also proved to be a blessing in disguise. When the COVID-19 came, the hall booking were cancelled and the hall rent was to be refunded. That time it was revealed, because when the people started claiming refund of 20,000 rupees, they said that we have a receipt of 20,000. That time this was revealed. So you can imagine that for verifying or for normal audit, the internal auditor was he was very much frightened कि अभी क्या होगा मेरा, because see, we usually verify the bank statement, the receipt book, all that we verify. But very rarely it may occur to us that we should also verify the application form for the booking of hall. Now such cases arise. And it's a very common thing, because we never even apply our mind that we should go to that extent. That 3 leading hospitals in Mumbai, they have formed a medical trust to help the poor people. Now there was, last 20 years, ever since the trust was formed, internal auditor, a very senior and good firm, and statutory auditor, again a senior and good firm, they are conscientious people. I know both of them. Now what happened in that particular hospitals, there was one sub-staff. His son was a very smart boy, in the sense, very, he was getting education in BCom and all, and he used to seek guidance from these internal auditors and all, कि exam में वगैरह, and they were, since he was a smart boy, they used to train him up, अच्छा उसको accounting का वगैरह guidance they used to give, and he had a friend also. Both these boys were employed in that trust, and they were doing the audit, they were doing the accounting and other things, and first 10 years they were doing the job very excellently, because they got trained and they were very confident. Therefore internal and statutory auditors were both very comfortable. But in the last about 8 to 10, 9 years, and it was reported in the press also, the boys had committed a fraud of 6 to 8 crores by creating some dummy firms, dummy entities, and siphoning of the funds from this to those firms. And the most unfortunate part was that one or two such, there were 5 to 6 entities, one or two entities, the income tax return was uploaded through these CA firms only. Now the CA firms argued that, see, they were known to us, they were doing the balance sheet themselves, we have not verified, we have not even audited those balance sheets of the persons whose returns they were uploading. Or they approached our office and my staff only helped them to upload the returns. We are not responsible for the content of those returns. But the fact remained that they had, these frauds are very again commonly occurring. The modus operandi is that the bank statements, certain entries are masked and Xerox copies of bank statements are given for verification. There was a lady in one very leading hospital of Mumbai, very senior lady, and all the trustees or the governing body members of that particular trust were big surgeons, senior doctors. What she used to do was, when the doctor was just walking towards the operation theatre or something, she used to run, sir, ye jo hai na, you just sign this check, and because now we have to buy that machine, X-ray machine, which is very expensive, we have to break this FD and cash karke, and then we have to issue it check to the vendor. The good faith he used to sign. She used to encash that FD, and exact amount she used to transfer to her account. And there was a contra entry, and therefore there was it was not revealed. These are the very common things. And when these two boys, what happened was, once both of them were on leave and one new girl was appointed, and she was wondering why in every year I am seeing that there are 2 or 3 months bank statements which are Xeroxed. And that time this fraud was revealed. So now these things are happening very, very commonly. Another area which is very again interesting as to one of the principles is that because of your misconduct or because of your lapse in the audit, whether anybody is aggrieved or not is immaterial. You cannot say कि मेरा गलती है लेकिन उसका कुछ नुकसान नहीं हुआ. That you cannot say. Our institute says they have a very narrow but a proper approach. It's a right approach. They say that we don't tell us all those things. You only show whether you have done the work correctly. You don't tell us that the complainant is a badmash person. You don't tell us that आपके इससे किसका नुकसान नहीं हुआ. I'll give you 2 or 3 instances of these cases. Suppose there is a charitable trust, 100% exemption which is proven. Even in the assessment, appeals, everything is proven that it is 100% exempt. Still, if there is any lapse or error or lacuna in the audited balance sheet, the income tax department can still file a complaint. And you cannot argue कि उनका कोई नुकसान नहीं हुआ. There was one commissioner of income tax in Bangalore. He had a special vengeance against the chartered accountant. And in one particular go, he filed a complaint against 11 chartered accountants, and on the very flimsy grounds कि उसके some very small bank account का bank reco नहीं था. Means that case is very interesting, but before that let me tell you another interesting case कि remote connection से कैसा complaint आता है. There was an executor and trustee company which was a 100% subsidiary of a nationalized bank. Now in that this executor and trustee company, they executed the wills of their clients after the client's decease. They were executing the will of a particular client, and that deceased person's lady was interacting with them. This person's daughter was interacting with them, and that lady was asking them to interpret the will in a particular manner so that she would get more property. But they were not listening to her. So she filed a complaint to the directors कि अरे आपके manager, they are not doing the job properly. So please instruct them. But directors also did not pay any heed to her request. So what she did, she engaged another chartered accountant and she wanted to teach a lesson to the directors. So she engaged another chartered accountant to verify whether there are any flaws in the audited financial statements of the company. That had nothing to do with her actual grievance. So now unfortunately among chartered accountants there is no unity. Sometimes it is very painful to experience that sometimes bhajiwalas and rickshawalas are more organized than us, but we have no unity. We gather in study circles only for academic discussion. But there are many issues which are now threatening the very survival of the profession, but we are least bothered about it. In fact, in study circles, I always request them that there should be brainstorming sessions, because chartered accountants' representations, their opinions do not matter in the government circles. The government is not very much in favor of the chartered. Then this was told by one of the ex-presidents of the institute in an open forum. And he says that individually each and every senior secretarial level officer in finance department is individually biased against the chartered accountants because of their personal experience. But the government's thinking and perception is that there have been so many frauds and scams that have taken place, but hardly any scam, not a single scam has been exposed by the auditor. And therefore, the credibility of our profession is at stake, rather it is lost. And there is a crisis of courage in the profession. Therefore, we cannot put our foot down, ki nahi, we won't tolerate this. We are not assertive. And because of that, and sometimes people, many young chartered accountants, they lack communication skills. I have come across so far in my 30 years of this particular, only one case I have come across when that chartered accountant, a young boy of 35, was very strong and very confident and very courageous. And he exposed a fraud of 600 crores in a cooperative bank. And there were threats on gunpoint to him to sign the balance sheet and to take back his qualifications or whatever. And he said, you can kill me because I have shared all these documents with 5 of my partners, so I don't mind even if you kill me. This is the solitary instance I have come across. Otherwise, our chartered accountants are not very well known for showing the courage to certify only the correct things or which they are convinced that it is correct. And there are many factors. I am aware because I have gone through all these processes and I was a very mediocre chartered accountant because we can't afford to be strict. That is the problem. And after a particular age, what happens is when our chartered accountants start their practice, then as the saying goes that the beggars are no choosers. So whatever work comes, they have to accept. And then some client gives them some support. He offers his premises for their office and all that. And then he pays a lot of attention to their work because it's something like a part-time employment for him. After he gets more work from outsider, his attention to that particular client gets reduced. Then that client is unhappy. But since because of the obligations, this chartered accountant keeps on rendering service to him, although now that service might have become unremunerative for him. And then he makes a lot of compromises in certifying their balance sheets. And afterwards, after a particular while or number of years, when he is in a position to say no, he can't afford to say no. Because then they start blackmailing him. Arey, last 10 साल आप ऐसा ही कर रहे हैं audit. अब last 10 साल you have never raised this point. Now how are you raising? And because of that, he is also under pressure and he perpetuates the errors which he has done. Now there was a company which had this particular thing. Let me complete that story of the executor trustee company. So that lady filed a complaint to the ROC's office. Because that chartered accountant told in his report that yes, AS3 is not properly reported, AS18 there are some lacunae, which had nothing to do with the true and fair view of that balance sheet, nor it had anything to do with the grievance of that lady. But she filed a complaint to the ROC. ROC summoned all the directors, 4 directors and each auditor also. And the directors explained to that ROC, sir, ये तो frivolous complaint है, उसका actual grievance अलग है. ROC also agreed, yes, I am aware कि ये सब बकवास frivolous matters है. But then the complaint is before me, so I have to do something. तो उन्होंने compounding कर दिया. All people paid 5,000 rupees fine and everybody was happy. But there is a system in all the now regulators and revenue officers that whenever there are such shortcomings in the auditor financial statements, they have a practice of sending it to the institute as an information. So the other principle of these disciplinary proceedings is that the disciplinary proceeding can start either on a complaint or on an information. And what is the difference between complaint and information is that when there is a complaint, the complainant is throughout there in the proceedings. Whereas if it is an information, the institute first writes to the informant whether you want to file a complaint, because the complaint has to be filed with a fee of 2,500 plus GST and in prescribed form. Then file that form and come in a complaint. But if it is only information, then you are out of the picture. That means informant is out of the picture. And we will only let you know the end result of this. Whereas, as against this, the complainant, when you file a complaint, the complainant is throughout there in the proceedings. So there are counsel from both the side and they have to argue. This is the major difference. But now these NSCs, BSCs, all regulators, Registrar of Cooperative Societies, yes, I am aware of the time, gentlemen. So, yeah, I'll wind up, don't worry. So, these regulators, they have a practice of keeping on sending all these things and information. There is a huge heap of such information matters with the institute. The pendency is huge. And therefore, just as we have in tribunal and high courts, we have benches. Now there are 4 benches of disciplinary committee. And earlier there used to be only one. They used to move around the whole country. But now there are 4 benches and still the pendency is not getting completed or rather cleared. Now there was one company where the turnover was about 600 to 800 crores. And the corporate office was in Mumbai, but they had some mines in Orissa side. There was a term loan from a PSU bank, about 100 crores for machinery. It became an NPA. Now it is very common that all nationalized banks or PSU banks or these private banks, big banks, as soon as any unit becomes an NPA, they file a complaint to the institute. They make, because auditor is the first scapegoat. The most softest target is auditor. So they say we relied on this and therefore now our money has gone. So likewise there was a complaint. The firm approached me and then they had maintained excellent working papers, very impressive, copybook style working papers were there. So I admired them कि अरे इतना paper मैं भी नहीं रखता हूँ, but we sent all that. After 1 or 2 years, because as there's a normal time, see the punishments in the disciplinary cases, the torture which you have to undergo for 4 to 5 years is the real punishment. Actual punishment may not be that harsh. So here after 2 years they came to me again and said, sir, they have asked only for 2 points now. One is whether you had approached the bankers to verify the bank statements. Then I asked them what was the position. They said, no, we had not, but we have the photocopies of all the bank statements with us and they are reconciled also. I said, very good, then we will write to them. But the next question was tricky. They said, had you written to the debtors and creditors for confirmation of balances? And here most of the chartered accountants lack miserably, because under our guidance, essays and all, third party evidence is of utmost importance. And normally an average chartered accountants utterly lacks in that. They don't even show that they had attempted to get the third party confirmation. And here what had happened was, because of that, there was huge fraud. And the professional skepticism is where, for example, suddenly a company's growth takes place, like turnover is increasing, profit is increasing, then you must smell that there is something fishy going on, because all of a sudden, when there is not economic activity is very stagnant or stable, how suddenly then there are circular transactions and their turnover is hyped, and all that they must be either thinking of IPO or some bank loan or something. So this professional skepticism has to be present always in the mind of auditor, and since chartered accountants lack, and sometimes they lack courage also, they feel, अरे ये client को पूछने का कैसा? Sometimes they know, sometimes knowingly also they do it, but that is the sad story of our profession, that unfortunately we have to, yes, I am aware of the time, another few very DHFL cases. DHFL also was another very big episode that took place, and that is how NAFRA came in the picture. So DHFL, what had happened was, they had some 200 odd branches, and for last 15 years they used to appoint a statutory auditor in the AGM, and all the branch auditors were appointed by the board, and they used to write a standard letters. About 40 and odd CA firms were there, each one was allotted 4 to 5 branches for the branch audit. Now again, these are very interesting things that happened in this particular case. So the branch auditors, the appointment was from the board of directors. When the board letter used to receive that you are going to give your report in this particular page. You are supposed to check these things. This is the checklist. You have to address your report to the statutory auditors, and your fees will be paid by the company. That's all standard things were there. And this was happening for last more than 15 years. Now when the bubble of DHFL burst in 2017-18, thereafter in the November 18, NAFRA was established. For basically this particular DHFL scam, in that context this NAFRA was got established. Otherwise it was contemplated in 2013 Act only. And then there were many queries that were sent, but two were important and two were very rather relevant to us. They said that first and foremost, your appointment itself is invalid, because under the new amended Act of 2013, even the branch auditors are required to be appointed in the AGM 143(8). Whereas here your appointment is done only by the board, and not, therefore your appointment itself is invalid. Then I said, so I was very happy. I said, if our appointment is invalid, then we are not statutory auditors, so you have no jurisdiction on us. But then they said, no, without prejudice to all this, there are many lacunae in your audit. And another lacuna there was that you have not given engagement letters. Now this is another drawback of our chartered accountants, because appointment, then previous auditor communication, all these happen. But we are also expected to give an engagement letter, which in a small firm is never given. And now SA 210 makes it mandatory, and our institute has given good guidance on how an engagement letter should be drafted. Now in that case of the unsecured loan by the nationalized bank to the company, there also the thing was that the secretarial record, there was no such mention of any such loan, and even from the MRL also, Many people are not even aware कि MRL में क्या लेना है, means mid-size and small firms I am talking of. I am not talking of big four or large firms. But in MRL, they just get some standard declarations from the directors. They don't mention now what bank accounts, where are the bank accounts and what are the authority structure to operate the bank accounts is to also to be mentioned in that, because otherwise there were some bank accounts which are not forming part of the books at all. And that was that company case where the successive years the bank loans were given and that particular loan was not accounted for at all. So where the bank accounts are there and what is the authority structure for operating those, that also should be forming part of your MRL. And there are many things which we took, and our institute has given proper guideline. Checklists are there, what are the questions that you should ask. Unfortunately, our chartered accountants do not take it that seriously. I will just find out whether there is any. There was, in particular case, it was so horrifying experience that a particular lady client was quite familiar with that particular company, firms, and she used to come to that firm very often. And the firm, the two chartered accountants that helped her because she had lost her husband and that she had 2 kids. So the firm was helping her in getting, because she was doing some investment agency. They used to file a return free of charge. Once she came and said, sir, ये मेरे friend का balance sheet आप sign करेंगे ना तो he will get a good loan. But the chartered accountant said, no, we won't sign unless we verify. And that lady got furious. And it was revealed that she was the wife of a very notorious gangster who had been killed in a police encounter. And therefore the whole underworld was supporting her, and they made the life of these CAs miserable. They had to sell their office because of the harassment. And what she did beyond that, in that CA firm she used to come very frequently. And that particular chartered accountant, he just came out of his chamber for some work, and his mobile was lying there, and she had become so familiar that she was aware of locking and unlocking of his mobile also. And she sent very obscene and dirty messages to herself from the chartered accountant's mobile. And then she took a photo of that screen, went to the police. Poor chartered accountant was behind bars for 5 days. Now they are on bail. As I told you, because of these petty complaints, or rather frivolous complaints, many chartered accountants are facing the criminal trials and they are on bail. And there are many, many instances like this. And we are totally unconcerned about our professional brothers. There was so many fraud cases where frivolous complaints were filed. One member of parliament lady has filed a complaint against a chartered accountant, and it was, I think, press में भी काफ़ी उसका ये हुआ था. She alleged that this chartered accountant came to my house in the morning, early morning, and he has stolen cash of some 7 crore rupees from my house, and he carried that in a bag which is hanging on his shoulder, and CCTV में वो bag और सब है footage. So she is a member of parliament, so the police and she had managed everything, and that chartered accountant was harassed, not only harassed, but he was beaten, he had become injured, he was in a hospital for 6 months. But the allegation is that he had stolen this cash. Now in the disciplinary case, he is arguing that in the first place उसके पास 7 crore आया कहाँ से? Because she had done lot of jugglery in many charitable trusts. That nobody, unfortunately our institute entertains such complaints, and they entertain and they try to actually hear these cases for years together, and that particular member of parliament lady never turned up for hearing. Now then he said, one argument, brilliant argument he made, sir, are you aware of the weight of the cash of 7 crore rupees? And that is something like 840 kg. So can a man just carry it on a bag hanging on his shoulder, 7 crore rupees, 840 kg? But unfortunate part is that our regulators, the less said the better, but they don't apply their mind even on these basic things. And then finally the disciplinary committee told her that you have not turned up for 8 occasions. See, they tolerated her absence for 8 occasions. And next time if you don't come, for want of evidence, we will throw away this case. But that poor chartered accountant had to face all these things for years together. So these are the disciplinary cases which are actually. Then I told you the one another principle. Maybe 500. See, the 840 is a matter of details. No, not mix up. Even if 500 rupee notes are there, it was a very huge, something which is astronomical, which a common man cannot carry. That is the principle which I want to convey. Actually, I have never done that weight because I never had that kind of money. No. It was, even assuming it was 500 rupee or even 2000 rupee notes in those days perhaps, even then it would be a huge weight, no? Not for a simple man to carry on his shoulder. Maybe. Exactly, that's what I am telling. Even 100 kg hoga to be difficult hai na. Hai na, but hearing mein that complainant has to be present, no? He used to come, poor fellow used to come here on all 8 occasions. But complainant, they are all mischievous people, they are politically influential people. I'll just go through any important thing which is. Now there are many complaints which are arising out of QRB and FRRB reports. Because QRB and all, I think Padma Shri is in a better position to throw light on that. But there are queries because ultimately our own professional brothers are only responsible for all these QRB and other queries because they check it so minutely that there are points like you are supposed to give the title as independent auditors report, but unfortunately that independent word was missing. That was also one of the points of complaint. That means your negligence, small things, as also Madam mentioned in her lecture, that certain things are required to be reported at certain places only. You cannot argue that those have been reported elsewhere. Now, there was a case where there is some change in the format. And for example, one clause, subclause E of clause 13 was put to subclause I of some clause 14. Now that chartered accountant, unfortunately, वो copy paste के approach के कारण, he reported it in the old form where that place was there and again also in the new place. He said, why you reported at both the places? So this was also one of the points. That means it is not enough that you are reporting somewhere, or even if you are reporting at the place where it was not required to be reported, that also does not save you. That is the unfortunate part of it. So QRB, FRB, there are many such cases which are coming up. Now in that mines case which I told you, that third party evidence they had not taken. Unfortunate part was that almost 80% of the documentation which was made available for the audit, almost 80% of it was fabricated, including bank statements. Like there was a bank with which some Orissa Urban Cooperative Bank or something from that. Now we don't go to verify whether that bank really exists. And that bank statement, which was a handwritten bank statement, which was totally fabricated. And the company, the auditor had relied on that bank statement, it was reconciled. So that means you cannot proceed, even if just because it is a bank statement, you cannot blindly accept it. Then this about engagement letter, as I mentioned to you. So likewise friends, the principles, as I told you, 7 years is not a very rigid or blanket time bar. There are very interesting cases which are coming up now, like there was, and an average, a small chartered accountant has to, one chartered accountant, he had a client for many years. Right now this CA is of 70-year-old, that client is also 70-year-old, but now that client's next generation is handling the business affairs. That client has migrated to the US. Over the years, since, and these are the things which I am just giving you a word of caution, that over the years we become over friendly with the client. And the client required some working capital amount, so the chartered accountant lent to that amount to him. It was maybe not very big amount in the year 2014. In 2017 he returned it. Again during COVID he required some working capital, so again he lent. Now this time the client said, no, I will give you interest. He said, Arey Baba, mujhe interest nahi chahiye, you just repay that amount. But clients did not pay the fees, nor he ever paid the principal amount nor the interest. Now when the next generation came, they had another group company, they changed the auditor. Here also this particular auditor's fees were not paid. But then he threatened them that since my fees are not paid, I will file a complaint, so those fees were paid. Now as a vindictive thing, what this next generation people, the son of that client, he filed a very interesting complaint. He said that you had lent money to the firm, that means that entity was a firm, and over the years because of the accrual, it has become a very sizable amount. Now since you had a financial stake, there was a conflict of interest and therefore it is a misconduct on your part. That means that chartered accountant obliged the client by lending him money, helping him out, and on the top of it, and that person is neither paying his loan nor interest and nor his fees. And now he has filed. See, in our BCA journal every month I have been sharing all these small cases which are troubling or perplexing the small and medium chartered accountants, and these are typical of these cases. There was one lady, rather she was working, young girl, she was working in a firm, she had a COP. How the complaints come to you beyond your imagination, these are very interesting illustrations. She, because of her maternity, she did not renew her COP. Then 3-4 years she stayed at home only and she never renewed her COP. That was in the year 2007 or 8. 2010-11, see, her father was a CA and her uncle also was a CA. Her uncle exhausted the limit of 60 tax audits. What he did, he forced her signatures on 12 balance sheets after the limit of 60. And immediately she received a complaint from because now it goes to the immediate, from CBDT to the institute. And now there was a dilemma whether she should expose, because otherwise it would be a very criminal offence on the part of her uncle. So now to save her uncle and from the disrepute and other things, she has owned up that particular because her signature was without holding the COP. So that she has owned up that particular misconduct just to save the image of the family. There are many such small things coming up and which are really disturbing. The only principle is that there was one girl who got married in a business family. Her husband was into business, her brother-in-law also was into business. Now, because of the familiarity, he used to get his audit and other things done from that particular girl. For 1 or 2 years, she was not very comfortable because he used to never give the records properly. He used to give at the 11th hour, and that is the usual case with all small CAs. And she used to tolerate. In the 3rd or 4th year, she made a remark about the default in GST. Because then she gathered courage, because then 3-4 years after wedding, the girls also become smarter. So she put a remark, but she never reported it in the tax audit. Because as a corollary, it should also come in the tax audit. Similarly, in the DHFL matter, they argued that we are not statutory auditors. But then I said, if you are not statutory auditors, in the tax audit, in 3CA you have mentioned that the statutory auditor was done by us. So these are, inadvertently contradictions arise. So in this particular girl's case, now that brother-in-law has filed a complaint against her because he is pressurizing her to give a statement that it was my error that his GST was not paid, so that it would protect him in the GST penalties. Now, how can she give this? But because of, your relationships, there are certain pressures, there are some delicate relationships where you cannot avoid the signing, and thereafter, when the context is lost, after 3 or 4 years, all those things which you did in that good faith ultimately boomerang on you, and then you have to undergo that trouble. So I think that these are endless list of cases which I can share with you. You had query?
So, the SQC1, where the standard on auditing on audit documentation, which are deemed to be auditing standards under 143 tab. I being an audit firm, I maintain my audit papers, audit documentation for 7 years. That's what the auditing standards say. Now, after a span of 7 years, let's say the 8th year or 9th year, and a complaint is initiated. I'm saying
Initiated.
Can I be taken to task in the 10th year in respect of a matter which was audited by me, and now if audit papers are being asked for, now I've done away with those audit. So can I
Then questioning can be there unless that particular error or that mistake which is alleged is so obvious and self-evident that even if working papers were there or not, then you are bound to explain. But just because it is more than 7 years, you cannot say, because where external evidence is now not required at all. This thing is so obvious that, so that is the spirit of that particular thing. For example, that I told you, he signed as a witness, but the testatrix had not signed it at all. Now, how can that be? Means, because when it is a witness, it is nothing but a criminal thing, because when you are signing as a witness, you say that that person has signed in my presence. So, if you are a witness, so that is, I say, it is self-evident. On the face of the balance sheet itself, suppose there are formatting, like Schedule 3 is not followed, or certain things, some remarks are missing only.
where it is not apparent on the face of the financial statement?
Where no external evidence is required, then No. That depends on the actual facts, but by and large, if it is self-evident, then you are caught. Yes. I think I thank the WIRC for giving me this opportunity to share my whatever little experience I have. We are again meeting post-lunch, but for me, more valuable opportunity was to listen to Padma Shri Madam, because she has that kind of exposure which I don't have, very frankly. So, in the panel discussion also, she has to hold the mantle on her shoulders. And now I don't want to stand more time in between your lunch and us means this time. I thank the organizers for this opportunity, and I thank all of you for the patient hearing. Thank you and Jai Hind.